Good morning. Good morning. Could I have your attention, please? If I don't get quiet soon, I'm going to sing, and that would be a very unfortunate way to start the morning. Go for it. Oh, well, thank you, Chris. But welcome to this day-long session on active citizenship roles of Tufts alumni. Our opportunity today is to celebrate the extraordinary active citizenship of Tufts alums in all fields and in all schools. And if you've had a chance to see the slides scrolling, they represent an exciting cross-section of citizen businesswomen, citizen veterinarians, citizen economists, and so on. And a second purpose of our day is to not only recognize and celebrate your extraordinary active citizenship, but also to reinforce your ongoing social change work. And so in that regard, I wanted to welcome not only alums and fellow faculty members and staff from the university, but also current students, all of whom are future, soon-to-be alumni. So I want to encourage both alums and soon-to-be alums to use the day to connect with each other around your shared civic and social change work. Because the agenda that we have includes not only having a stimulating day together, but also to build and strengthen a growing network of Tufts alumni who individually and collectively are working to repair the world and to build healthier communities. We've got a very full day ahead. It's my honor at the start of the day to introduce our keynote speaker, John Tisch, class of 1976. John is the ideal person to kick off this session because he truly exemplifies values and skills of active citizenship. John, you are indeed the quintessential citizen businessman. When what is now called Tisch College, and I hope that those of you who've been with this campaign for a while have long since forgotten our awkward early term. And in addition to his generosity of his support and the stability that it has provided for building active citizenship as a defining strength of Tufts, a byproduct of John's naming gift was that he gave us a much better name. Tisch College, or as we were talking last night, Tisch for short. But when what is now called Tisch College was just the germ of an idea that John DiBiagio and Brian O'Connell and I and several of you in this room, faculty colleagues and colleagues from advancement were developing. John Tisch was actively encouraging and advocating that movement. And I was saying to John last night that there was a trustee meeting in the fall of 1997. College didn't come into being until two to 3 years later. But at that meeting, we laid out in very preliminary ways this bold, at the time we were worried that it was an overly ambitious idea of a university-wide, wide college that would make active citizenship a hallmark of all degree programs in the university. And when we finished that little presentation, with an exquisite sense of timing and drama, John Tisch jumped to his feet and he raised his hand in the air and he said, "This is a splendid idea. This is what I want my alma mater to be doing. I'm going to do everything I can to make it a reality. He has done so in spades from that moment on. The impact of his enthusiasm and leadership on fellow trustees and others involved in the process was just instrumental. And I want to conclude my introductory remarks by observing that we have an amazing situation with, that is our lead benefactor, also being the most powerful spokesperson for the vision of active citizenship at Tufts. Recommended reading, Citizen U by Jonathan M. Tisch, which happens to be the most interesting and the best articulation of the role of active citizenship in society and in higher education, including at Tufts. In fact, if a few of you have not had a chance to read this, we have a few copies which I'd be glad to share with you later in the morning. But John Tisch, we're just thrilled that you're with us this morning. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker.
Good morning, everybody. Rob, thank you. A few words on Rob in a moment or two. To stand up this morning at what is the 10th anniversary of a very important event, not only for our university, but for me personally, is truly rewarding. To have been on campus since yesterday, to see the first chair of the Board of Advisors for Tisch College, a gentleman that we know is so committed to public service, who now serves his country as ambassador to Spain, to have him up on stage in the building next to us and have a dialogue with a woman who broke a lot of ground, become the first female Speaker of the House, who is now the leader of the House Democrats. And to think about the history as Rob described it, which allowed us to get to yesterday's event and today's dialogue, is very important for me personally, but I think hugely important for this university. And Rob so eloquently spoke about the vision that our former president, John DiBiagio, had, that our dear friend, Brian O'Connell, had, that Rob and his colleagues had. And I do remember that board meeting. I have had the pleasure of being on the Tufts board for 19 years, and I think the only other person with more tenure than me at this point is our chair, Jim Stern. And when I think back over the 19 years that I have seen the evolution and the growth and where Tufts University has gone, that was a defining moment, where the Board of Trustees had a first look at what has now become Tisch College. They had that first discussion that Rob had certainly done his homework. Brian O'Connell, as sort of the dean of this movement on a national basis, had come in and so eloquently discussed the opportunity, and President DiBiagio presented it to the board in a way that allowed us to really move forward with what is today, once again, Tisch College. The original funders of that school with that crazy name that I promise not to even bring up today also need to be recognized. Pam and Pierre Omidyar were there from minute one. Pam is a fellow trustee at this point with me. And the Omidyars really embraced this notion of how we can educate active and engaged citizens. And I do appreciate their leadership at such an early point. And certainly, as the baton was handed from President DiBiagio to President Bacow, for the last 10 years, we have had an amazing ally in the CEO, in essence, of Tufts University, really believing in the power of active and engaged citizens. And I think we have been so fortunate to have Larry there, and we see on a daily basis his leadership, his passion, and his support, and his advocacy for Tisch College. He certainly is an eloquent ambassador for all that is good about this movement. And Larry told me yesterday that he would have been here today, except that he may have the only excuse that is plausible for not being with us at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning in April. He is at the bris of his first grandson in New York City. So I think we give the president a hall pass for not being here this morning. When I think of others to recognize, certainly our provost has been very involved. Provost Bruca has been very involved in the advancement of the effort. And Rob mentioned university advancement. And in my day, it was called development. Now it's called advancement. And I know Brian Lee is here today, who we are so fortunate at Tufts to have running in a department that when you think, what is the connection between university advancement and the work at Tisch College, it's a very strong connection. We would not be able, and Rob and the administration and the faculty would not be able to do anything if it wasn't funded. And so I thank Brian and his team for all that they have done to ensure that the dollars are there, that the corpus is there for Tisch College to exist on a regular basis. Well, certainly, as I mentioned, we've had so many other individuals. There was a dinner last night. We are the bittersweet reality that our dean is stepping down at the end of this school year. And those of us that had a chance to get together last night and talk about the last 10 years under Dean Hollister really was very moving for us, the current board, a few students, a few Tisch scholars. Matt and Laura were there representing the students. And Nancy Wilson, who will be our interim dean, who I know that baton will be handed so easily and eloquently for the next interim period. But to talk about Rob last night was really rewarding for all of us that were in attendance, because everybody had their own story. Everybody had their own memory of how the vision has been touched, the vision has been created, the vision has been realized. And so I thank everybody for that. I mentioned Alan Solomont as our first chair, but certainly, once again, as we saw so many smooth transitions, we now have to recognize Deb Jospin, the current chair of the Board of Advocates, who is there every single day worrying, every day figuring out a way to make Tisch College even stronger, even better. And when we had our board meeting yesterday, to sit there and to listen to the discussions, to listen to the students, I heard about the trip to Jamaica from the Tisch scholars and saw the pictures of how they touched the lives of these young people in this country. And to see the passion, and Deb has certainly found a way to take her own background, her Tufts education, her other master's degrees, her real world experience, and lay that over the Board of Advocates who have done such a great job. And Deb, I thank you for your current leadership at the head of Tisch College. And we know that there's going to be a transition at the top of Tufts University. President Bacow will be stepping down on July, how many days in July? 31st. And Dr. Monaco will start on August 1st. And I'm very pleased to report that I've had a chance to talk to Dr. Monaco about his vision for becoming an active and engaged citizen. And without divulging too much of the discussions with Dr. Monaco and the search committee and then the executive committee, I can very happily say that one of the attractions for Dr. Monaco to leave a 20-year career at Oxford University and come to Medford and Somerville was because of what he saw as the potential for further enhancement and work at Tisch College. He truly believes that this aspect of Tufts makes us different than many, many other fine universities. I had a chance to see his wife Zoya yesterday and their 3 kids as they were running through Gifford House. And it's going to be great to have a new, fresh vision following on the heels of the myriad accomplishments of Larry Bacow. So I think Tisch College is very excited, and Tufts University should be very pleased with our new leader who will be starting on August 1st. My sense is that we live in an age today where active citizenship is more important than ever. It's a time where our country and certainly the whole world are faced with unprecedented challenges, from the environment to education, from healthcare to the economy. We're certainly confronted on a daily basis with problems that are so enormous, so big, and they're larger than one person can fathom doing it by themselves. And it's only by working together, by understanding that business has to work with not-for-profits, that educators and individuals from every walk of life work together, that we're going to overcome these challenges. We really have no other choice. It is our responsibility to become active citizens. And I'm so pleased to say that it's that sensibility that Tisch College was formed with. One of the most eloquent spokespeople for this philosophy was the late John Gardner. John Gardner, as many of you know, served as Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare under President Johnson. He was the founder of Common Cause. And he wrote an essay which was entitled The American Experiment. And in his essay, he had many wonderful thoughts, but two paragraphs stand out. And let me quote John Gardner. When the American spirit awakens, it transforms worlds, but it does not awaken without a challenge. Citizens need to understand that this moment in history does in fact present a challenge that demands the best in them. Most Americans welcome that voice that will lift them out of themselves. They want to be better people. They want to help make this a better country. Awaken them to what they can do for their country, the country of their children, and their children's children. And I think in today's world, you can extrapolate out John Gardner's discussion about just one nation to the challenges that we face on a global basis. What active citizens have in common is what I call the power of we. Active citizens know that in today's complex world, we no longer have the option of existing in isolation. No single person or organization is capable of mobilizing all the resources that are required to face the challenges that we encounter on a daily basis. So what that means is that we need to put aside our individual concerns and work together towards the greater good. And if we are going to try to achieve the goal of creating a civil society, and the three tenets of a civil society are really quite simple, but the absolute epitome of where we should be heading, and those tenets are opportunity, responsibility, and community, we all must get there by working together. Like many of you, I had a chance to learn about this notion of responsibility from very dedicated and caring parents. I learned at an early age about growing up with some affordability. We were very fortunate through the hard work of my mother and father, my aunt and uncle. We early on learned that we were lucky, but that also we had a strong responsibility to the community. My father, Bob Tisch, was very involved in so many aspects, whether it's New York City. He served his nation as Postmaster General for 19 months under President Reagan and did so much for so many. But one of his projects that he really felt passionate about was one that he founded in the year 2000 in New York City. It was called Take the Field. And he came to the realization as that decade was starting that the playing fields at the high schools in New York City, serving thousands and thousands of young people, were torn. They were littered with glass. They didn't have any conducive environment to becoming an athlete, to allowing athletics and fitness to work into your life. So he started this program called Take the Field, where he literally, with his partners in the corporate community, with money from the city, with money from the state, rebuild the playing fields of every high school in all 5 boroughs in New York City. Now, through his co-ownership of the New York Football Giants, he had a chance to engage in the world of sports, and so he was able to understand how important athletics are, not only as a combination with education, but also so that people can deal with the health issues that we all face on a daily basis. And then my mother, Joan. And my mother, Joan, who very fortunately is still with us, had also had a passion for the community. She is involved in so many aspects. And one quick story. She was one of the early individuals who had a concern back before we knew all of the challenges that AIDS would bring into our society. She was very concerned because she was losing friends. And if you remember back 25, 30 years ago, nobody quite understood all of the dimensions of what became this epidemic. So there was an organization that had started back in the early 80s called the Gay Men's Health Crisis. And my mother decided that she was going to go volunteer. She was going to go spend her time. And what she would do is she would have her driver drop her off a couple blocks from the headquarters of the Gay Men's Health Crisis, and she would walk in there, and she was known as Joan. And Joan would stuff envelopes, and she would lick stamps, and she would answer the telephone and start to work with the people early on who were dealing with the crisis that nobody really knew a lot about. One day she overheard a conversation, and it went something like this. The office manager was saying, "Oh, we have a real problem in the office today because our Xerox machine gave out and we can't make any copies." And my mother said, "Well, what does that mean?" She said, "Well, Joan, if we can't make copies, we can't hand out flyers, we can't do the work that's important to the organization." So she said, "Well, why don't we just buy a new Xerox machine?" The office manager said, "Well, that's $475 that we don't have." So Joan said, "Well, wait a second." She goes to her purse and she pulls out her checkbook, she pulls out her pen. She writes a check to the Gay Men's Health Crisis for $475 and hands it to the office manager. This guy says, "That's very nice, Joan, but how do we know this check isn't going to bounce?" And she said, "I promise you, this check is not going to bounce." And it was at the first moment when they looked at the check and they saw that her name was Joan Tisch that they realized that they had in their midst somebody who had not only the emotional capacity, but also had the financial capacity to help them, and that's when they put her on the board, and she spent 25 years. She spent 25 years being a dedicated board member of the Gay Men's Health Crisis. But just the way she started her connection with that organization, not wanting anybody to know who she was a lesson to my siblings and my cousins and me and our spouses to once again understand this responsibility. We learned at an early age that this is something that we had to do. I personally am not a huge fan of the term giving back. Maybe it's been because I live in New York and I see so much people trying to do things for the wrong reasons to end up in the gossip columns or end up on the society page. And so many people that I know write a check and they put on a tuxedo or they put on a dress and they go to an event and they think that they have given back. To me, that makes it a bit too transitory. To me, it makes it too event-driven at times. So I like the term understanding one's responsibility to the community. I think that engulfs what we all need to embrace as citizens of this earth. And what Tisch College believes is that we all have a skill set that can and should be used to help. Tisch College is about exploring new ways to incorporate civic engagement into our lives, creating a culture of active citizenship and bringing sustainable solutions to once thought of intractable problems. For example, that notion, giving back, in the old days, you might think of going to volunteer at a soup kitchen or helping at another community-based organization, and that is highly commendable. There is certainly nothing wrong with that. But here's the difference. Here's where you all understand that this can be looked at differently. Active citizenship means examining the root cause of hunger, in the case of a soup kitchen, and considering the entire range of actions you can help to eliminate those causes. Where volunteerism tries to alleviate the symptoms, active citizenship strives to cure the disease. This new way of thinking is at the heart of Tisch College, which has redefined the way universities engage students, faculty, alumni, and the communities around this very important movement. Through an intensive combination of work in the classroom and extracurricular experiences, as I heard yesterday, going on trips to Jamaica to help young people down there, Tufts students today develop knowledge, skills, and values that equip them to be more effective leaders. Tisch College has no walls. Tisch College has no degrees. Tisch College infuses citizenship throughout the university because, again, we believe it's everyone's responsibility to be engaged, not just those that choose a path in public service. So at our medical schools, we're not simply training doctors. We're not simply educating men and women to go into medicine. We are creating citizen doctors. At our dental school, we are creating citizen dentists. At our engineering school, we are creating citizen engineers. And certainly in arts and sciences, where I graduated with a political science degree, we are graduating citizen lawyers, citizen teachers, citizen musicians, citizen entrepreneurs, citizen writers, and citizen men and women. As President Bacow says, and this is one of my favorite quotes of Larry, when he beams, when he talks and discusses the work at Tisch College, he says Tisch College serves as an amplifier for whatever your major or your interests are, where you can learn more about your roles and responsibilities once you leave Tufts University. Whatever profession a Tufts graduate chooses, we make sure that they leave here with an understanding that they have a responsibility to contribute their skills to the community and the tools that allow them to become a more effective leader in the field that they have just studied and spent time learning about. We want them to be prepared for a lifetime of active and engaged citizens. A few years ago at commencement, a graduating senior, Alexandra Pryor, delivered the baccalaureate address. Let me quote a few paragraphs from Alexandra's very, very wise words. Now we understand the importance of active citizenship. It's Tufts' anthem. But the problems that we're looking at just seem so big. When the Tufts student looks out at the world and the problems that plague it, he or she looks at the same world that everyone else does. Tufts, though, has taught us to see it a bit differently. Tufts has taught us that hard situations are not the same as impossible ones. And Tufts has taught us not to see the obstacles, but instead to see the people that are affected by them. Alexandra went on to say, overwhelming as the obstacles we may face seem, and as hard as the projects we set out to accomplish may be, we need to remember that we are Tufts students. We chose to go to Tufts because we wanted to face these issues. We chose to go to Tufts because it was the place that could best bridge the gap between academia and active citizenship, between learning and knowing and doing. We chose Tufts because we do want to change the world. And Tufts chose us too. Tufts chose us because it believed that we actually can. Well, she's right. And it's been 10 years since Tufts formalized its commitment to active citizenship with the creation of what is today Tisch College. And together we can take a lot of pride in what our university has accomplished. Our students are graduating as the next generation of civic leaders. Our faculty are researching and writing about this field of study in new ways, in ways that hadn't been really looked at before. Our community partnerships are innovative and making real differences in the lives of our neighbors. And Tufts has become a pioneer globally in the world of active citizenship. The Talwar Network, launched at the Talwar Conferences on Civic Engagement, Roles, and Responsibilities of Higher Education, hosted by President Bacow in September of 2005, has now grown to 180 universities in 60 countries, all working together to strengthen their civic engagement missions. And as the Dean knows, the Talwar Network will be meeting in Madrid in this June, in a couple months, and the attendance is the largest ever, and I'm going to have an opportunity to be with them to talk on a global basis with the leadership from Tufts about how we discuss these issues internationally. And Tisch College model is being emulated by many other colleges and universities across the United States, and as I said, around the world. I have a chance to travel a lot and give speeches on many college campuses, and every time I'm on a different college campus, people want to say, what was the genesis of Tisch College? It really has become the leader for us to follow and learn more about. Ultimately, the impact of Tisch College will be measured by success in educating new generations of active citizens. We've achieved so much, and yet we recognize that we live in a world that demands our greatest and most creative solutions. By continuously developing and introducing new programming in collaboration with the school's departments and student groups at Tufts, Tisch College is building a culture of active citizenship throughout the university that can meet those demands. In another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, there will be thousands and thousands of graduates of Tufts University serving as effective civic leaders and achieving lasting impacts in communities around the world because of what they have learned here at Tufts University. Graduate after graduate, these people will be going out and changing the lives of their neighbors, one person at a time, one community at a time. Once again, I think back to John Gardner. And he used a phrase in his writings that was so simple, but really told the story so effectively. His phrase was creating a democratic compact. And in 7 words, he really made it very simple. Freedom and responsibility, liberty and duty, that's the deal. And once again, a journey that allows us to live and create a civil society, a society in which all people have the opportunity to achieve their fullest potential, is being now looked at Tufts. And I believe that's what Tisch College and Tufts University stand for. And I would certainly be remiss to conclude without reference to another inspirational figure who I mentioned very briefly, who was integral into where we are today at Tufts University and Tisch College. Brian O'Connell was a fellow board member. He was very engaged in the university and really a founder of this movement that we are now so very much a part of at Tufts University. He was, in a great sense, he was the spiritual leader of what is today Tisch College. And I learned a great deal from Brian, and I know that he certainly was a mentor to many people that are sitting in this room. Sadly, as you know, last month Brian lost his battle with cancer, but he certainly was a visionary, he was a leader, and he was truly inspirational. In one of his many books, this one being 50 Years in Public Causes, Brian talks about, and I quote, a silent cycle of cause and effect. And what he meant by that is the harder people work for others and for the fulfillment of so many important social goals, the more fulfilled they are themselves. Standing before you today, I once again am humbled to have my name associated with the meaningful work that so many of you are doing, so many previous graduates, so many graduates to come, and once again the work of the administration, the faculty, the deans. And I must tell you that when you use the word fulfillment, that is certainly how I feel, but also humbled. But what is truly important is that through the work of Tufts University and Tisch College, so many others like yourselves are on this path to fulfillment. Fulfillment for yourselves, fulfillment for those around you, fulfillment for the lofty but attainable goal of making the world a better place. Thank you for being engaged and living an active citizen life. Your actions and deeds contribute directly to improving the conditions around us and allows the light on the hill to continue to shine bright. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Adam.
John, thank you so much. We do have time for a couple of questions or comments.
Anybody? I know it's a Saturday morning, early. Matt.
Matt, I'm going to give you the microphone so we can memorialize your question for posterity.
Where would you like to see Tisch go, the college, in the next 10 years?
This notion that I mentioned of Tisch becoming a laboratory for other universities and colleges, I think is very fulfilling. And the potential for the work being done here to be spread organically around the country and around the world now through the Taiwan network is, I think, very important. The kind of work that's being done here, the way that the issues are being discussed, is a wonderful model, and for it all to link back to all of you, in a sense, is very rewarding. When you look at the graduates and you look at the kinds of issues they're dealing with, when you talk, as I had a chance to do with your fellow students and the Tisch Scholars yesterday during that period from 5 to 6, and to a person, to hear them say that they're going to go into medicine, but they want to do this first, that they're going to go into community organizations, but they want to do this first, that they eventually want to go into law school, but they're going to go to Latin America first. That is the goal and the aspiration and the ability for Tisch College to truly make a difference. So as a class of freshmen come in September, as a class of seniors leave in about a month, we will recharge and re-energize new students to be doing so much more. And once again, if we can use the ideas that are birthed here at Tufts to spread this movement around the nation and the world, and I look back 10, 20 years from now, that will be, once again, extremely fulfilling. Deb?
Deb, let me just give you the microphone.
John, thank you. I think for so many of us, when we think about active citizenship, we think about, I would call it taking that vow of poverty, going into public service, working for the government, being public interest lawyers, being medical students who go to the medical corps. I want to acknowledge the work that you are, to me, a model of, which is a very successful business person who has really infused the model of active citizenship in Loews Hotels. And that, to me, part of what gets me excited about this work is it's not a marginalizing field. You don't have to just be doing, what we would quote unquote call God's work. That while you're doing God's work in another way, but that you have infused this in your business model. And that, to me, I want to acknowledge that, and I want to say that to me is such an exciting model, because that really has the potential to change the world. And I want to just say thank you. Also, do you have 2 seconds to sort of talk about how what you've done at Loews Hotels can be a model for other businesses?
Thank you, Deb. There used to be a sense in the business world that you couldn't do well and do good at the same time. And that belief was around for years, and public companies, private companies would sort of hide behind that. Deb mentioned Loews Hotels specifically, and what we discovered was, and the belief that I've had for many, many years, is that is not a fair and accurate statement. I'll give you the specific model at Loews Hotels, where I've been the CEO for 20 some odd years, but then broaden it out a bit. At Loews Hotels, let me back up for a second. The hotel business is a little bit different than other businesses. If a property isn't doing well, you can't pick it up and move it. You can't go to another city. You can't go to another state. You are obviously there with a very fixed asset that is embedded in that particular location. Also, hotels are open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 7 days a week. And we also tend to be, obviously being part of the service sector, we are employers of lots of men and women who, in a sense, live in the same community within maybe 10, 15, 20, 25 miles. So we put all of those thoughts together, and 20 years ago, we started something called the Loews Hotels Good Neighbor Policy. And we did it to send specific messages to our various constituencies that we need to partner with. We did it to send a message to our customers and our clients that we do care about their community. And the specifics of the program were and still are, that each hotel, and we're fairly small when you look at the broad brush of today's lodging industry, but when there's food left over from a banquet, we give it to a food bank. When we're renovating and there are sheets and towels and pillowcases and pieces of furniture, we give it to homeless shelters. We make our meeting rooms available to community-based organizations at no charge to come in and do the work that's very important to them. And we also embrace the local activism of our coworkers. And that was 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, that was a bit unheard of. And the good news for, I think, so many communities around the country is that our industry has now really shown their commitment. And so many of the bigger names in the industry, the Marriotts, the Intercontinentals, the Starwoods, have similar type programs. We felt very fortunate as sort of the pioneers 20 years ago. So that's the doing good part. The doing well part comes to us because, as I said, we need to reach out to our partners in so many areas that we work in. Our clients feel good because they see us doing something to better where they live. And it comes back to us when maybe you're planning a bar bat mitzvah for one of your kids, maybe you're planning your parents' 50th anniversary party, maybe you're planning a special event for somebody in your family. They tend to come to us because they say Loews Hotels has been one of our neighbors. Our coworkers like it because, once again, this is where they live. This is where they're raising their kids. This is where their families are getting the initial stages of education that hopefully will allow them to come to colleges and universities like Tufts. And we support our coworkers. And so we have tried to debunk that myth of doing well and doing good. This whole notion, Deb, of corporate social responsibility is one that's very important in today's for-profit environment. And I think many companies are now coming to the realization, as witnessed by the fact, especially the maybe Fortune 100 or the Fortune 500 companies, that they are very much part of the discussion about what does corporate social responsibility mean. And the reason that they're doing that is, and these are if you're a public company, obviously you have to have your quarterly earnings and you do everything you can to drive as much to the bottom line. But what they're discovering is that their customers are asking for it. The kinds of men and women like yourselves, for those of you that are still students and those of you that are recently graduates, you don't want to work for a company that is not engaged in the community. So these corporations are also doing it because they want to attract the best and the brightest, and the best and the brightest are saying, yes, I want to make a paycheck, and yes, I want to be successful, but there are other things going on in my life, and I want to work for an employer that cares. And also there is this understanding of the vast needs that are not being met by government, and certainly as government tries to deal with so many issues and we get out from this deficit, that government has less and less to commit to the needs in various communities. So I think there is a greater understanding today of the responsibility of corporate America, and we're fortunate at Loews Hotels to have sort of tapped into this idea 20 years ago, and it's a discussion that certainly is much more understandable with CEOs when they make decisions about their commitment to the community.
John, thank you for your stirring vision.
Thank you. Thank you all.